I'm here in New York City, sitting on the steps outside Penn Station. I'm having a brief visit here because I originally booked to see Roger Waters at Madison Square Garden in 2019 for the 2020 concert, and I finally made it here in 2022. So that is Madison Square Garden over there. And I'm just taking a moment to sit in the shade and start this video.
Everybody, my name is Sam Turvey. I am with the Empire Station Coalition. Please bear with us.
I am Jane Jacobs.
I am also Jane Jacobs.
60 years ago, my colleagues and I, activists, planners, preservationists, stood on 7th Avenue. We marched with signs. The old Penn Station, neglected and permitted to fall into disrepair because of the age of the automobile.
Which was one of the greatest architectural crimes when it was torn down. So we're just trying to make sure that doesn't happen to the rest of the neighborhood.
So are they going to tear down Penn Station?
No, so they're going to be tearing down this building and a few other important buildings. Yeah.
So it turns out what's happening is that Penn Station is going to be, it's going to be sold, and they're going to build a high-rise. And these people here are protesting because Penn Station and the area around it has lots of studios, lots of musical kind of interests, lots of artists and creators feel like it's going to, well, take away space for them to do their thing. So they're having this protest. So this is my first time in New York City, and it's a pretty noisy place, and it's difficult to get a bit of quiet to make a video. So I've come here to Central Park, and you can just see the skyscrapers behind me. So I'm sitting on a rock at lunchtime in Central Park, and it's interesting. I guess it's the same in London as well, of course. People are desperate to have somewhere to sit in the shade with a bit of greenery around them, and so the place is absolutely chock-a-block. But it is lunchtime in fairness, so it seems okay. Now, as you know, I talk a lot about mental health, and I'm always astounded to the extent that mental health problems exist, because I don't think mental health problems need to exist, but we need to take ownership and control of the processes, in a sense. I call it cracking the code of good mental health, but anyway. Turns out in New York City, 1 in 5 in the population has a mental health problem. So I looked it up, and that turns out to be, according to the mayor of New York, if you take the whole population of New York City, which is about 8 to 9 million, and if you say, well, 1 in 5 of that population has a mental health problem, that turns out to be the entire population of Manhattan Island, which I am on right now. That's 1.63 million people have a mental health problem. And it's astounding. And you know, people try to figure out what to do about it, and the problem persists. Actually, the problem of mental health is getting worse. Certainly after the pandemic, you know, mental health problems are worse than they were, and you know, for different populations, the elderly, and as well for children and young people. So I was reminded of the great horse manure crisis of 1894. Major cities like London and New York and Paris, and even ancient Rome, had the problem of horse manure. Now, great cities ran on horses. In New York City alone, there'd be 100,000 horses, and each of those horses produced between 15 to 35 pounds of horse manure a day. Now, when the city was smaller, that was a good thing in a sense, because that was a social good. You could take that horse manure and you could use it for fertilizer. But as the cities got more and more successful and people flocked to them, the number of horses grew, and the problem of horse manure grew to such an extent that you need more and more horses to get rid of the horse manure. So it actually became a self-perpetuating problem, such that in 1894, the Times in London published an article saying that in 50 years, London will be buried under 9 feet of horse manure. Anyway, city planners took it seriously, and so they convened a conference in 1898 here in New York City, which is being here reminded me of that. And so it was a 10-day conference, and they wanted to figure out what to do about the problem of horse manure. Anyway, the conference broke up after 3 days because they said, well, nothing we can do about it. We can't figure it out. It's an intractable problem. Now, the problem actually was solved by someone called Gottlieb Daimler and his associates, who invented the automobile. And so by, like, say, 1912, horse numbers had diminished significantly, and therefore the problem of horse manure had diminished because cars were taking over. You had mechanized and electric buses. So a different problem came in, which was the pollution caused by cars, and now, of course, you know, the pedestrianized streets and whatnot, but actually the problem will be solved by electric vehicles. And New York City is notable. There's just masses of electric bicycles here, and people are going 20 miles an hour on these electric bikes. It's like having a electrified motorcycle. It looks pretty dangerous, but you know, I haven't seen anyone killed as yet. So I think we're in a similar problem with mental health in a way. It seems an intractable problem because I think we're trying to solve the problem of mental health using the same kinds of processes that created it. So in essence, you know, we're using the same thinking, and Einstein said you can't solve a problem using the same thinking that created it. So I was thinking about what to do, what would be some simple things that we could do. Now, I always say with mental health problems, they're unnecessary. We fall into them by mistake in a sense because we're not aware of what's going on, because much of our life processes are run by automatic pilot, and never is that more apparent in big cities such as New York City. It's just so busy and so vibrant and so active, and everyone's running on autopilot. And actually, it's quite fascinating to see the technology, the human technology involved in not killing everybody at every intersection. Anyway, I think that the revolution in mental health is going to come from us taking responsibility for our own mental health. I've said this numerous times in videos, but it seems to me the only solution because it's a different solution to the problem. The problem of mental health has typically been tackled by the medicalization of mental health problems, you know, so you end up taking an antidepressant, and there's been so much information recently in the news saying that the whole myth of antidepressants has been exploded. Antidepressants are not that useful. They have significant side effects, and really it's a very poor management strategy for mental health problems. And in fact, you know, it comes from the old thinking. It comes from the success of medical programs. It comes from the success of science. But it's the wrong solution, because depression, anxiety, those kinds of things, they're not medical problems, they're psychological problems, and therefore they require a psychological solution. So I have a few tips that I've been thinking about for a while, and it seems to me that these are things which are often lacking when people struggle with mental health problems, and therefore they are things which are valuable to help us to overcome mental health problems. So the first one is speak your truth. Now, I know it sounds simple, speak your truth, but really it means value what you have to say and feel able to communicate what you have to say. Your opinion matters, or it should matter to you. Now, it may not matter to other people, that's not the point. The point is that we have to value your opinion to such an extent that you're able to express it. So speak your truth. Don't deny your truth, don't suppress your truth, don't push your truth away. You're a valuable person, and therefore what you have to say has some value. Speak your truth. I can't tell you the number of people who have told me stories about putting themselves last in life. You know, spouse has got to be sorted out, children have got to be sorted out, jobs got to be sorted out, parents have got to be sorted out. Everybody needs to be sorted out, and there's not a lot of energy left at the end of the day for you. And so putting yourself last is a guaranteed way of feeling pretty exhausted and run down. And I advocate something different, because bear in mind we're doing something different, right? Put yourself first. Now the reason I say that, and you might say, well, that's selfish, that's greedy, I couldn't possibly do that. But the reason you have to put yourself first is this. When you're in a good situation, you have the capacity, the ability, the space to help other people. But if you put yourself last, you often don't have enough capacity to actually be genuinely helpful. So putting yourself first is a different strategy. Now bear in mind, a different strategy is what's required, because the same old strategies will give you the same old problems, and we don't want mental health problems to be something that we entertain. We have to have a change in society. Now, your kids, my kids, nobody is taught anything which is useful about mental health. And that's because we don't prioritize it. To some extent we prioritize mental health problems, but not really. Mental health has always been a poor relation to physical health when it comes to allocation of resources and funds, etc. So prioritize mental health as much as you prioritize physical health. Now, you would teach your kids to brush their teeth. Why? Because it stops having dental problems later in life. But what do you teach them about how to avoid worrying, or how to avoid being anxious, or how to not be depressed, or how to value themselves, how to have good self-esteem? We don't teach them anything about that, likely enough because you don't know anything about it, because you weren't taught anything about it. So we have to have a balancing or a rebalancing where mental health is as important as physical health, because that is the only kind of different thinking which is going to give us a solution which is going to be meaningful and useful if we want to eradicate mental health problems. When people start to become depressed, they disengage from all sorts of different things, and that is I've just noticed a rat running around the rocks I'm sitting on, and it's not frightened, it's quite a tame looking rat in all essence. When people become depressed, they tend to disengage with life, and that's apparent because they avoid doing things, they tend to stay in, and if you take it far enough you end up being in bed. But there's a process by which we journey towards depression, and that process includes not being engaged with life, not having any interests, not having any hobbies, not having any sort of things which deepen your experience of being alive and being involved in the world. So I have this idea that we want to be as involved and connected and deeply connected as we possibly can. So we want to be engaged as possible in life. because being engaged in life is a great antidepressant and it's a great preventative. It's a prophylactic, because the more engaged you are, the less likely you are to fall between the cracks of meaning, of commitment, of relationship value, and of doing things which are good experiences of living. Don't speak negatively about yourself. Now, when you speak, you hear, and if you're habitually the kind of person, and if you're the kind of person who habitually speaks negatively about themselves, you're actually just setting yourself up to have a problem, because you are telling yourself, because you are hearing, that you are not able, anxious, or something else. Okay, I'm not good enough. I don't. People don't care. That kind of thing. So if you're going to talk about yourself at all, talk about yourself in a constructive and positive way, an accurate way, a meaningful way, a way that gives you a sense of value in the world. Do not, under any circumstances, ever put yourself down. Because the world is a difficult place to live, and there are lots of opportunities for other things to put you down. So if you put yourself down as well, you're conspiring, and that's not really a very good thing to do. Do not conspire to be depressed. So therefore, don't speak negatively about yourself. Don't think negatively about yourself. Don't put yourself down. Allow yourself to be interested in yourself. Are you interested in yourself? Now that means, like, are you interested in what you think? Are you interested in what you do? Are you interested in the experiences that you have? Do you think yourself as an interesting person? Because everyone has the ability to be interested in themselves. I know it sounds a strange thing to say, but I swear to you that many people who have a mental health problem are not interested in themselves, and in fact, sometimes they're so avoidant of paying attention to themselves that it almost becomes strange. You could say, well, where's the psychology? Like, where's your internal world? Where's your, where are you? So being interested in yourself is a good prophylactic, because it prevents you from being bored with yourself, to being down on yourself, and it helps you to recognize that living is a process. And as such, sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't go so well, but it's still a process, and we have to do our best, because we are going to go through the process irrespective of whether we do our best or not. We're going to go through the process irrespective of whether we're interested in ourselves or not. Therefore, we might as well be interested in ourselves. I think a great thing to do is to develop your creativity. Now, sometimes people say, oh, I'm not very creative, I can't do anything. That's not true. Human beings are incredibly creative individuals. But the question is, do we develop that creativity? Do we do anything with it? And I think creativity is a great anti-aging thing, actually, but it's a great way of just feeling that life is meaningful. I went to see Roger Waters last night at Madison Square Garden, which is actually the reason that we came to New York City in the first place.
And then they get you to trade your heroes hot as the tree, hot as the cool breeze, cold.
I think he's 78 and he's still writing songs. He's a creative person. You might say, well, yeah, he's special. Well, yeah, but he's special because he spent 78 years 78 years practicing being special. So, you get what you practice. Practice being creative in any sphere at all. It doesn't matter what it is. From gardening, decorating, writing, anything at all. It doesn't have to be directing movies or publishing novels. Just being creative is a process. And I think that process has value to be engaged with. And the outcome is by the by. It's the process of being creative that's interesting. Many people have spiritual interests, and it's a good thing to develop those. Spiritual interests connect you with that sense of feeling that there's more to life than meets the eye. There is a greater experience, and that we're just privy to a small amount of it. And actually, scientifically, that is correct. We are privy to a very small amount of reality, about as much as we can tolerate in fairness. But if you push it a little bit further, then it becomes a spiritual quest, and that's interesting. So, allow your spirituality, if you have a spiritual interest, to grow and be something that you carry with you, because a strong spiritual interest is a gift, and it could be one that keeps giving and giving and giving. Lastly, don't let the external world capture so much of your attention that you neglect your internal world. There's a balance to be struck between external reality, which is this of course, and internal reality. And that balance has to be managed, because the external world is so attractive and so grabbing and so engaging, and in fairness we have to work to live, we have to do many things. It's very easy to neglect our internal world. But neglecting your internal world is one of the reasons that we have mental health problems. If you value your internal world, and if you allow it to be something that is as important to you as your job, as your relationships, as the things that you do, as the sports that you play or the things that you watch on TV, if you allow your internal world to be important, then that balance will carry you through forever, and you won't then have to descend into having a mental health problem. So all of the things that I've said, of course, are things which might be advice after the horse has bolted, but they're still things that you can engage in now, because they will pull you back from mental health problems. They'll pull you back from anxiety and depression, OCD, panic. They'll all pull you back, because when we close the doors to these things, by, for instance, investing in creativity or investing in relationships or being interested in yourself, then you're bringing yourself back from that brink, from that negative, dark place. I hope you find this interesting. It's a different way of thinking about our lives. It's a different way of thinking about the things that we do. If you find it interesting, please subscribe, like, leave comments. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. And if you have any questions, please also leave questions. So, thank you, and I'll see you next time. Probably next time I won't be in New York City, or I may be still, who knows.